This bear cub used to sleep with this human girl daily. What happened after 10 years was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun filtered through tall pine trees, casting long shadows across the wooden cabin nestled by lake-whispering pines. Lily Morgan woke to the familiar sounds of birds chirping outside her window. She was only 5 years old, with curious blue eyes and blonde hair that seemed to catch every ray of sunlight. Her parents, Robert and Emma Morgan, had moved to this remote cabin 6 months ago, seeking peace away from the busy city life. That morning started like any other. Emma prepared breakfast, while Robert checked the fishing nets he had set the previous evening. Lily sat at the table, her legs swinging back and forth, unable to reach the floor. She was eating her pancakes when they heard it, a soft, pitiful cry coming from somewhere near the lake. "What was that?" Lily asked, her fork suspended midair. Emma paused her cooking and listened. "I'm not sure, sweetie." The sound came again, louder this time. It wasn't quite a whimper, not quite a cry, but something in between. Something that pulled at Lily's heart. Without thinking, she slid off her chair and ran to the door. "Lily, wait!" Emma called after her, but Lily was already outside, her bare feet padding across the dew-covered grass. She followed the sound to a small clearing by the lake's edge. The morning mist was still rising from the water when she saw it, a small, trembling bundle of brown fur. Lily stopped, her heart beating fast in her chest. It was a bear cub, no bigger than a large dog, curled up beside a fallen log. Its fur was matted, and it looked thin, like it hadn't eaten in days. "Mommy, Daddy!" Lily called out. But she didn't take her eyes off the cub. "Come quick!" Robert and Emma rushed to their daughter's side, freezing when they saw the bear cub. Robert immediately grabbed Lily's arm, pulling her back. "Lily, stay away. It's dangerous," he warned, his voice low and urgent. But Lily pulled against her father's grip. "He's crying, Daddy. He's sad. Where's his mommy?" Emma scanned the surrounding forest, concern etched on her face. A bear cub alone meant a mother bear could be nearby, and nothing was more dangerous than a mother bear protecting her young. "We should go back inside," Emma whispered, but the cub let out another pitiful cry, and Lily's eyes filled with tears. "He needs help," she insisted, looking up at her parents with pleading eyes. Robert and Emma exchanged worried glances. They had moved to the wilderness to be closer to nature, but this was not what they had in mind. Still, something about the cub's situation troubled them. There was no sign of the mother bear, and the cub looked too weak to have been abandoned recently. "Stay here," Robert finally said, releasing Lily's arm and approaching the cub cautiously. Years of working as a wildlife photographer had taught him a thing or two about animal behavior. As he got closer, the cub backed away, pressing itself against the log. Its eyes were dark and frightened, but there was something else there too, a desperate kind of hope. "Robert, be careful," Emma called, holding Lily's hand tightly. Robert knelt a few feet away from the cub and noticed what they couldn't see from a distance. A deep cut on the cub's back leg, crusted with dried blood. "It's injured," he said over his shoulder, "and I don't see any signs of the mother." "Can we help him, Daddy?" Lily asked, her voice small and worried. Robert sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm going to call Jeff. He'll know what to do." Jeff Carlton was their nearest neighbor, living 3 miles down the road. He had been a park ranger for 20 years before retiring, and knew everything there was to know about the local wildlife. While Robert went back to the cabin to make the call, Emma and Lily stayed, watching the cub from a safe distance. Lily couldn't take her eyes off the small bear, Its chest rose and fell with each breath, and occasionally it would lift its head, sniffing the air before settling back down. "Why is he all alone, Mommy?" Lily asked. Emma shook her head. "I don't know, sweetie. Something might have happened to his mother." "He's scared," Lily said, with the simple certainty of a child. "I can tell." When Robert returned, he brought a blanket and some water. "Jeff's on his way. He says not to approach it, but we can leave some water nearby." Robert placed a shallow dish of water a few feet from the cub and backed away. The three of them waited, holding their breath. After a moment, the cub raised its head, sniffing the air. Slowly, painfully, it dragged itself toward the water and began to drink. Lily smiled, squeezing her mother's hand. He was thirsty. They watched in silence as the cub emptied the dish. When it finished, it looked directly at them, its dark eyes meeting Lily's blue ones. Something passed between them, a connection that none of them could explain. "Look, Mommy," Lily whispered. "He's saying thank you." Before Emma could respond, they heard the sound of Jeff's truck coming up the gravel driveway. The noise startled the cub, and it tried to retreat, but its injured leg gave out, and it collapsed with a whimper. Lily broke free from her mother's grip, and before anyone could stop her, ran toward the cub. "Lily, no!" Emma screamed, but it was too late. Lily knelt beside the frightened cub, her small hand outstretched. "It's okay," she said softly. "Don't be scared. We're going to help you." The cub froze, its eyes wide with fear, but it didn't run, and it didn't lash out. Instead, it sniffed Lily's hand cautiously. Robert and Emma watched in terrified amazement as their 5-year-old daughter gently stroked the wild bear cub's head. The cub closed its eyes, leaning into her touch. "Well, I'll be damned," came a gruff voice from behind them. Jeff Carlton stood there, his weathered face a mixture of surprise and concern. "In all my years, I've never seen anything like that." "Jeff, what do we do?" Robert asked, his voice tense. "The cub is injured, and Lily—" "Let's take it slow," Jeff said, approaching carefully. "That cub is in bad shape. Looks like it's been alone for days." As Jeff got closer, the cub pressed itself against Lily, seeking protection. Lily wrapped her arms around it, her face buried in its fur. "He's my friend," she declared, looking up at the adults with determination in her eyes. "He needs us." Jeff knelt down, examining the cub from a distance. "It's a male, probably about 3 months old. That wound on his leg needs treatment and he's malnourished." "What about the mother?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jeff's face darkened. "I found a female bear about a mile east of here yesterday. Poachers. I reported it. But—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Lily looked up, her eyes wide with understanding beyond her years. "His mommy is gone?" Jeff nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so, little one." Lily hugged the cub tighter. "Then we have to take care of him." The adults exchanged worried glances. Taking in a wild bear, even an orphaned cub, was not something to be taken lightly. "I should call the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center," Jeff said. "They're equipped to handle orphaned cubs." But Lily's face crumpled at the thought. "No, they'll take him away. He needs me." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Please, Daddy, Mommy, please." Robert looked at his daughter, then at the cub that was now resting its head on Lily's lap, its eyes half closed in what looked like the first peaceful moment it had experienced in days. "What would happen at the rehabilitation center?" Robert asked Jeff. Jeff sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "They'd treat his wounds, feed him up. Eventually, they'd try to release him back into the wild. But it's not always successful with cubs this young. They need to learn survival skills from their mothers. Emma knelt beside Lily, gently touching the cub's fur. And if we helped him? Just until he's stronger? Jeff shook his head. It's not legal to keep a wild bear, Emma. And it's dangerous. He's small now, but he'll grow. Bears aren't pets. We know that, Robert said. But maybe we could get special permission. Just temporarily, I could document his recovery for my wildlife photography project. The cub nuzzled Lily's hand, and she giggled, the sound bright in the morning air. See? He likes me. Jeff looked at the unlikely pair, the small blonde girl and the orphaned bear cub, and something in his expression softened. Let me make some calls. No promises, but I know some people at the wildlife department. Maybe we can work something out. As the adults talked, Lily whispered to the cub, her voice low and secret. Don't worry, I'll keep you safe. I promise. The cub looked at her with trusting eyes, and in that moment, something extraordinary began. A friendship that would defy all expectations and lead to a reunion 10 years later that no one could have predicted. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity at the Morgan cabin. Jeff had made good on his promise to call his contacts at the wildlife department, and after much discussion they had reached a temporary arrangement. The cub, whom Lily had named Oliver, would stay with the Morgans under strict conditions. Regular checkups from the local wildlife veterinarian, documentation of his growth and behavior by Robert, and a clear understanding that this was temporary, only until Oliver was strong enough to be properly rehabilitated. Dr. Marlene Rivera, the wildlife veterinarian, arrived the day after they found Oliver. She was a stern-looking woman with salt and pepper hair tied back in a tight bun, but her hands were gentle as she examined the injured cub. The wound isn't as bad as it looks, she said, carefully cleaning the gash on Oliver's leg. It's infected, but with antibiotics and proper care he should heal well. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, watching intently as Dr. Rivera worked. Oliver whimpered occasionally, his eyes never leaving Lily's face. He seems quite attached to your daughter, Dr. Rivera observed, glancing at Emma, who stood nervously by the door. They've been inseparable since we found him, Emma admitted. Lily even slept on the floor next to his basket last night. We couldn't convince her to go to her bed. Dr. Rivera frowned. That's not advisable. Despite his size and apparent docility, he's still a wild animal. I know, Emma sighed. We've tried to explain that to Lily, but she's determined. I'm not going to leave him alone, Lily declared, her small chin jutting out stubbornly. He gets scared when I'm not there. He cries. Dr. Rivera finished bandaging Oliver's leg and sat back on her heels, studying the unusual pair before her. I've worked with wildlife for 20 years, she said slowly. Bears especially. They're my specialty, and I've never seen anything quite like this. Is that good or bad? Robert asked, entering the room with a tray of coffee mugs. Dr. Rivera accepted a mug with a nod of thanks. I'm not sure yet. It's unusual, certainly. Bears generally don't form attachments like domestic animals do, but this cub has been traumatized by the loss of his mother and his injury. It's possible he's imprinted on Lily as a source of safety. Will that make it harder to release him back into the wild? Emma asked, voicing the concern that had been nagging at her. Potentially, Dr. Rivera admitted, which is why we need to be very careful about how we proceed. She turned to Lily. You're helping Oliver now, Lily, and that's very kind of you. But the best way to help him in the long run is to make sure he remembers he's a bear, not a pet. Lily's eyes welled with tears. But he's my friend. And friends want what's best for each other, don't they? Dr. Rivera asked gently. Lily nodded reluctantly, petting Oliver's head as he dozed off. the sedative Dr. Rivera had given him finally taking effect. "I'll come back in a week to check on his progress," Dr. Rivera said, packing up her medical kit. "In the meantime, follow the feeding schedule I've provided. He needs to gain weight, but we don't want him to associate you too strongly with food." After the veterinarian left, Robert set up a secure space for Oliver in the utility room off the kitchen, a compromise between Lily's desire to keep him close and the adult's concerns about safety. They lined a large wooden crate with soft blankets and placed it near the heating vent to keep Oliver warm. That night, as Emma tucked Lily into bed, she found her daughter unusually quiet. "Are you okay, sweetie?" Emma asked, brushing Lily's blonde hair back from her forehead. "Doctor Rivera thinks Oliver should go away," Lily said, her voice small. Emma sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "She wants what's best for Oliver just like we do. Bears aren't meant to live in houses with people. They're meant to be in the forest, living wild and free. But he doesn't have a mommy to teach him how to be a bear," Lily pointed out. "That's true," Emma acknowledged, "which is why the Wildlife Center might be the best place for him eventually. They know how to help bears like Oliver." Lily's bottom lip trembled. "But he needs me." Emma kissed her daughter's forehead. "Let's just take it one day at a time, okay? For now, Oliver's here, and we're helping him get better. That's what matters." Lily nodded, her eyelids growing heavy. "Can I check on him before I go to sleep?" "He's resting, just like you should be," Emma said firmly. "You can see him in the morning." Emma turned out the light and left the door slightly ajar, the way Lily liked it. She joined Robert in the living room, where he was reviewing the photos he'd taken that day of Oliver and Lily. "These are remarkable," he said, turning his camera so Emma could see the display. The image showed Lily sitting in a patch of sunlight on the cabin floor, Oliver's head in her lap, both of them looking utterly content in each other's company. "I'm worried, Robert," Emma confessed, sitting beside him on the couch. "What if Lily gets too attached? It's going to break her heart when Oliver has to leave." Robert wrapped an arm around his wife's shoulders. "She's stronger than we give her credit for, and this is an incredible opportunity for her to learn about wildlife conservation, about compassion, and letting go when it's the right thing to do." Emma leaned against him, unconvinced, but too tired to argue. "I hope you're right." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the forest through the open window. But then, a different sound caught their attention, a soft shuffling from the direction of Lily's bedroom. "Is she out of bed?" Emma wondered, starting to rise. Robert put a hand on her arm, stopping her. "Wait." A moment later, Lily appeared in the hallway, her teddy bear clutched in one hand and her blanket dragging behind her. Without a word, she padded across the living room and disappeared into the utility room where Oliver was sleeping. Robert and Emma exchanged a look, then quietly followed their daughter. They found her curled up in the large crate beside Oliver, her small arm draped over his furry body, both of them already fast asleep. "Should we move her?" Emma whispered. Robert studied the scene before him, then slowly shook his head. "Let's just watch them for a while. If Oliver shows any signs of distress, we'll take her back to bed." But the cub seemed entirely at peace, his steady breathing matched by Lily's. There was something almost magical about the sight of them together, the human child and the bear cub, finding comfort in each other's presence. "I'll get the camera," Robert whispered, unable to resist documenting this extraordinary moment. And so began a new nightly ritual. No matter how firmly Emma tucked Lily into her own bed, by morning they would find her curled up with Oliver in his makeshift den. After a few nights, they stopped trying to separate them and instead focused on making the arrangement as safe as possible, installing a baby monitor in the utility room and leaving the door open so they could hear any unusual sounds. The days fell into a routine. Robert would photograph Oliver and Lily together, documenting the cubs' recovery for the wildlife department. Emma, who worked remotely as an editor, would set up her laptop at the kitchen table, where she could keep an eye on the pair as they played in the fenced backyard. Lily chattered constantly to Oliver, telling him stories and secrets as if he could understand every word. And perhaps he did in his own way. Oliver followed Lily everywhere, his dark eyes watching her every move. When she read books on the porch swing, he would lie at her feet, occasionally batting at the pages with his paw. When she helped Emma in the vegetable garden, Oliver would dig alongside her, mimicking her movements. Dr. Rivera came weekly to check on Oliver's progress, and each time she seemed more perplexed by what she observed. "His wound is healing nicely," she admitted during her 4th visit, "and he's gained almost 15 pounds since you found him. Physically, he's thriving." "But," Emma prompted, sensing the veterinarian's reservation. Dr. Rivera gestured to where Lily and Oliver were playing a game that looked suspiciously like hide-and-seek among the trees at the edge of the yard. "It's his behavior that concerns me. He's not acting like a wild bear cub. He's acting like—" "A puppy?" Robert suggested. "More like a sibling," Dr. Rivera corrected. "He's mirroring Lily's behaviors, learning from her rather than developing normal bear behaviors. This could make rehabilitation extremely difficult." "So, what do you suggest?" Emma asked, a knot forming in her stomach. She knew where this conversation was headed. Dr. Rivera sighed, removing her glasses and pinching the bridge of her nose. "I think it might be time to consider transferring him to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. They have experienced staff who can work on gradually reducing his human contact while teaching him the skills he'll need to survive in the wild." Emma watched as Lily emerged from behind a tree, giggling as Oliver pounced playfully at her feet. "It's going to devastate her." "I know," Dr. Rivera said softly, "but the longer we wait, the harder it will be for both of them." That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, next to Oliver, as usual, Robert and Emma sat at the kitchen table, facing an impossible decision. "Maybe we could wait a little longer," Emma suggested, her voice catching. "Just until he's a bit older." Robert reached across the table and took her hand. He's already doubled in size since we found him. In another few months, he'll be too big and strong for us to handle safely, no matter how gentle he is with Lily." "I know you're right," Emma whispered. "I just can't bear the thought of what this will do to Lily." They were so absorbed in their conversation that neither of them noticed the small figure standing in the hallway, listening to every word with wide, frightened eyes. The next morning, Lily and Oliver were gone. The discovery sent the household into a panic. Robert found the utility room empty, the back door ajar. Lily had taken her backpack, and a quick check of the kitchen revealed missing food: a jar of peanut butter, a box of crackers, and several apples. "She must have overheard us last night," Emma said, her face pale with fear, as Robert called the local sheriff's office. A search party was quickly organized. Jeff brought his tracking dogs, and neighbors from miles around came to help comb the forest. Dr. Rivera arrived as soon as she got the call, bringing tranquilizer equipment in case they found Oliver in a state of agitation. "She can't have gone far," Jeff assured them as the search began. "A 5-year-old girl and a bear cub. They'll leave a trail." But hours passed with no sign of them. The forest around Lake Whispering Pines was vast and dense, with countless hiding places for a determined child and her furry companion. As the summer day began to wane, Emma's anxiety turned to full-blown terror. "It'll be dark soon," she said, her voice breaking as she and Robert regrouped with Jeff at the cabin. She's never been in the forest alone at night. "She's not alone," Robert reminded her, though the thought brought little comfort. A bear cub, no matter how devoted, was not a protector. Just as they were preparing to continue the search with flashlights, one of Jeff's dogs began to bark excitedly near the lake, about a half-mile from the cabin. The searchers converged on the area, calling Lily's name. They found her in a small cave formed by fallen logs and overgrown bushes. She was huddled inside with Oliver, her arms wrapped tightly around him, both of them wet and shivering. The bear cub growled weakly as the adults approached, positioning himself in front of Lily. "It's okay, Oliver," Lily said, her voice trembling with cold. "It's just Mommy and Daddy." Emma rushed forward, gathering her daughter in her arms. "Lily, oh my God, we were so worried. What were you thinking?" "I don't want Oliver to go away," Lily sobbed, clinging to her mother. "We were going to find a new place to live, just us." Robert knelt beside them, wrapping his jacket around Lily's shoulders. "Sweetheart, you can't run away. It's dangerous out here, and we love you too much to lose you. But you're going to send Oliver away," Lily hiccuped, her tears flowing freely now. "He needs me." Dr. Rivera approached cautiously, watching Oliver, who was pressing himself against Lily's legs, still wary of the other humans. "May I join you?" she asked softly. Lily nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. The veterinarian sat down on a nearby log, her expression gentle. "Lily, I know how much you care about Oliver. That's very special. But can I tell you a story about bears?" Lily sniffled but nodded again. "Bears are amazing animals," Dr. Rivera began. "They're strong and smart and very good at taking care of themselves in the forest. That's where they belong, where they can climb trees and catch fish and sleep under the stars. But to be happy in the forest, they need to learn bear things, not human things." "I could teach him," Lily insisted. Dr. Rivera smiled sadly. "Some things only other bears can teach, and the longer Oliver stays with humans, the harder it will be for him to learn those things." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "The wildlife center where I work has other bear cubs, just like Oliver. They play together and learn together, and when they're big enough, they go back to the forest where they can be free." Lily looked down at Oliver, who had calmed down and was now sitting quietly beside her, his head resting against her knee. Would he be lonely there? No, Dr. Rivera assured her. He would have friends, but he would miss you, just like you would miss him. Robert, seeing an opening, added gently, "What if we could visit Oliver at the center? Not every day, because that wouldn't help him learn to be independent, but sometimes. Would that be better than running away?" Hope flickered in Lily's tear-stained face. "We could visit him." "I think we could arrange that, Doctor," Rivera said, glancing at Robert and Emma for confirmation. They nodded immediately. "And," Emma added, struck by a sudden inspiration, "what if Daddy could continue photographing Oliver for his project? We could keep track of how he's growing and learning, even when we're not visiting." Lily considered this, her small brow furrowed in thought. Would he have a nice place to sleep? "The coziest den you can imagine," Dr. Rivera promised, "and plenty of good food and fresh water." Finally, reluctantly, Lily nodded. "Okay, but I need to tell him first, in private." The adults exchanged glances, then stepped back, giving Lily a moment alone with Oliver. They watched as she knelt in front of the cub, her hands on either side of his furry face, whispering words only he could hear. Oliver nuzzled her cheek, and fresh tears spilled down Lily's face, but when she stood up and took her mother's hand, there was a new resolve in her expression. "He understands," she said simply. The next day was one of the hardest of Lily's young life. Dr. Rivera came with a specialized transport crate, and Robert helped load Oliver into the back of her truck. The cub went willingly enough until the door closed behind him. Then he began to whine, his paws scratching at the bars as he looked for Lily. Lily stood in the driveway, tears streaming silently down her face, as Dr. Rivera prepared to drive away. At the last moment, she broke free from Emma's grasp and ran to the truck. "Wait," she cried, "he needs this." In her hand was her beloved teddy bear, worn thin from years of love. Dr. Rivera rolled down her window, her expression softening as she understood. "So he won't forget me," Lily explained, holding the stuffed toy up. Dr. Rivera took the teddy bear gently. "This is very kind, Lily. I'll make sure he has it in his new home." Lily nodded, stepping back as the truck started to move. "Goodbye, Oliver," she whispered, waving until the vehicle disappeared down the gravel road. That night, for the first time in weeks, Lily slept in her own bed. Emma stayed with her until she fell asleep, then joined Robert in the living room, both of them emotionally exhausted. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Emma asked, curling up beside her husband on the couch. Robert wrapped an arm around her. "I think we did the only thing we could, for both of them." They sat in silence for a while, the house feeling strangely empty without the presence of the bear cub that had so briefly, yet profoundly, changed their lives. "She's going to be okay," Robert said eventually. "Lily's stronger than we think." Emma nodded against his shoulder. "I know, but something tells me this isn't the end of the story for those two." She couldn't have known then just how right she was, or how dramatically their paths would cross again in the years to come. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was located in a beautiful, secluded valley, about 30 miles from the Morgan cabin. Surrounded by towering pines and protected by tall fences, it provided a sanctuary for injured and orphaned animals to recover before returning to the wild. True to their promise, the Morgans visited Oliver regularly during the first few months. Each visit followed the same pattern. Initial excitement as Oliver recognized Lily's scent and voice, followed by a bittersweet play session under Dr. Rivera's watchful eye, and finally the tearful goodbye that never seemed to get easier. Dr. Rivera was impressed by Oliver's progress. "He's adapting well," she told Robert and Emma during their fourth visit. "He's bonding with the other cubs, learning to forage for food, and showing healthy bear behaviors." "Does he still sleep with the teddy bear?" Lily asked anxiously. Dr. Rivera smiled. "Every night, the caretakers have tried to remove it several times, but he always retrieves it from wherever they hide it." Lily beamed with pride. "He remembers me." As the months passed, however, Dr. Rivera began to suggest longer intervals between visits. "It's important for his development," she explained gently. "Each time you come, it reinforces his connection to humans. For him to succeed in the wild, he needs to rely more on his instincts and less on his memories of you." It was a difficult adjustment for Lily, but she bravely accepted it, understanding in her childlike way that loving Oliver meant doing what was best for him, not what was easiest for her. By the time winter arrived, their visits had decreased to once a month. Oliver had grown significantly, his once tiny frame now solid and muscular, his playful swipes carrying more force than before. He still recognized Lily, still approached her with the same gentle affection, but there was a new wildness in his eyes, a reminder that no matter how strong their bond, nature was calling him back to his true self. During their January visit, A heavy snowstorm forced the Morgans to leave earlier than planned. As they prepared to go, Lily lingered by Oliver's enclosure, her gloved hand pressed against the fence. "I'll see you next month," she promised, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. Oliver watched her from the other side, his dark eyes unreadable. For the first time, he didn't come to the fence to say goodbye. Instead, he turned and lumbered away, disappearing into the small wooden shelter where he and the other cubs slept. Lily tried not to cry on the drive home, but silent tears slid down her cheeks as she stared out the window at the snowy landscape. "He's growing up," Robert said gently, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror, "just like you are." Lily nodded, wiping her face with her sleeve. "I know, but it still hurts." February brought even heavier snow, making the mountain roads impassable for weeks. By the time they could safely travel to the rehabilitation center again, nearly 2 months had passed since their last visit. Dr. Rivera met them at the entrance, her expression guarded. "Before you see Oliver, I want to prepare you," she said. "He's changed quite a bit since you last visited." "Changed how?" Emma asked, gripping Lily's shoulder protectively. "He's maturing faster than we expected," Dr. Rivera explained. "His wild instincts are becoming more dominant. Yesterday, he challenged the largest cub in his group for territory, and won." Lily's eyes widened. "Did he get hurt?" No, it's normal behavior for growing bears," Dr. Rivera assured her. "But it means he's becoming more bear-like, less attuned to humans. It's actually a very positive sign for his eventual release." They followed Dr. Rivera to Oliver's enclosure, a spacious area with trees, rocks, and a small stream running through it. 3 bear cubs were visible, playing together near a fallen log, but Oliver was nowhere to be seen. "Oliver," Lily called, her voice carrying across the snow-covered ground. "It's me, Lily." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a dark shape emerged from behind a cluster of rocks. A young bear, much larger than the Oliver they remembered, his brown fur thick and glossy against the white snow. He paused, lifting his head to scent the air. His nostrils flared as he caught Lily's familiar smell. The Morgans held their breath, waiting. Slowly, cautiously, Oliver approached the fence. His movements were different now, more deliberate, more powerful. He stopped several feet away, studying them with intelligent eyes that seemed to hold a question. "Hi, Oliver," Lily said softly, kneeling in the snow. "I missed you." Oliver tilted his head, a gesture so reminiscent of his cub days that Emma felt her heart constrict. For a heartbeat, the young bear seemed caught between 2 worlds, the wild calling in his blood and the human connection that had saved his life. Then, to everyone's surprise, he moved forward and pressed his nose to the fence, directly opposite Lily's outstretched hand. "He remembers," Lily whispered, joy lighting up her face. Dr. Rivera watched with professional interest. "Remarkable. His scent recognition is incredibly strong, even after all this time." But the moment was brief. A sound from the other cubs drew Oliver's attention, and without hesitation he turned away, bounding back to join his bear companions in their rough-and-tumble play. "That's it?" Lily asked, disappointment evident in her voice. Dr. Rivera knelt beside her. "That's actually more than I expected, Lily. The fact that he recognized you at all after these weeks is extraordinary. Most rehabilitating animals begin to lose their human connections much faster." Lily watched Oliver wrestling with a slightly smaller cub, their powerful bodies rolling in the snow. "He looks happy." "He is," Dr. Rivera confirmed. "He's becoming the bear he was meant to be." On the drive home, Lily was unusually quiet, staring out the window at the passing forest. Finally, she said, "I don't think we should visit anymore." Emma turned in her seat to look at her daughter. "What do you mean, sweetie? I thought you loved seeing Oliver." "I do," Lily said, her voice small but determined. "But Dr. Rivera said our visits make it harder for him to be a real bear, and I want him to be happy in the forest." Robert met Emma's eyes, both of them stunned by their young daughter's maturity. "Are you sure, Lily? We promised you could visit." Lily nodded, her decision made. "I'm sure. But can Daddy still take pictures sometimes, so I know he's okay?" "Of course," Robert agreed, pride swelling in his chest. "I'll keep documenting his progress, and Dr. Rivera will send us updates too." And so, with the wisdom that sometimes comes to children faced with difficult truths, Lily made her sacrifice for Oliver's future. The February visit became their last, though Robert continued to photograph Oliver from a distance, careful not to interfere with the cub's rehabilitation. Spring arrived, melting the snow and bringing new growth to the forest. Oliver and his cohort of rehabilitated cubs were moved to a larger, more remote enclosure, where human contact was kept to an absolute minimum. The Wildlife Center staff observed from hidden blinds as the young bears honed their foraging skills, climbed trees, and established their individual territories. In early summer, Dr. Rivera called with news. Oliver and 2 other cubs had been deemed ready for release. They would be transported deep into the national forest, fitted with tracking collars, and set free to begin their lives as wild bears. "Would Lily like to be there?" Dr. Rivera asked. "Not up close, of course, but she could watch from the transport vehicle. It might provide some closure." Robert and Emma discussed it carefully before presenting the option to Lily, who was now 6 years old and preparing to start first grade in the fall. "No," Lily decided after thinking it over. "I already said goodbye, and Oliver needs to go to his new home without remembering me." Instead, Lily asked for one thing: a final photograph of Oliver as he was released. Robert arranged to accompany the release team, promising to capture the moment Oliver took his first steps into true freedom. The release day dawned clear and warm. Robert left before sunrise, camera equipment packed carefully in his truck. Emma and Lily spent the day working in their vegetable garden, Lily chattering about her upcoming birthday party, seemingly at peace with the day's significance. When Robert returned that evening, his face told them everything before he spoke a word. "What happened?" Emma asked, setting down the book she'd been reading to Lily. Robert sank into a chair, running a hand through his hair. The release didn't go as planned. When they opened Oliver's transport crate, he wouldn't come out. The other cubs went immediately, but Oliver just sat there, refusing to move. "Was he scared?" Lily asked, concern filling her blue eyes. "The team thought so at first," Robert continued. "They tried everything, leaving food trails, giving him space, even playing recordings of other bear sounds. Nothing worked. Finally, as the day was ending and they were considering bringing him back to the center, Dr. Rivera had an idea. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn object, Lily's teddy bear, now dirty and missing one eye, but unmistakable. Oliver had this in his crate, Robert explained, handing it to Lily. Dr. Rivera thought that maybe he was waiting for permission. "From you." Lily took the teddy bear, holding it carefully in her small hands. "From me?" Robert nodded. "She asked me if I had anything with your scent on it. I gave her my scarf that you wore last winter. She placed it near the entrance to the crate with the teddy bear beside it." "And then?" Emma prompted when Robert paused. "Oliver picked up the teddy bear in his mouth, sniffed the scarf, and walked out of the crate." He stood there for a moment, looking back at us one last time. Then he turned and disappeared into the forest. He took the teddy bear with him. Tears welled in Lily's eyes, but she was smiling. He took it to remember me. That's what Dr. Rivera thinks, Robert agreed, reaching out to smooth Lily's hair. She said she's never seen anything like it in all her years of wildlife work. She's calling it the Lily effect, the power of a first bond. That night, as Emma tucked Lily into bed, her daughter asked a question that caught her off guard. "Do you think I'll ever see Oliver again?" Emma hesitated, unsure how to respond. The truth was, once released, rehabilitated bears rarely had any further contact with humans. That was the whole point of the program. "I think," she said carefully, "that Oliver will always remember you, just like you'll always remember him. But his home is the forest now, and yours is here with us." Lily seemed to accept this, snuggling deeper under her covers. "I hope he's happy." "I'm sure he is," Emma assured her. "And I'm very proud of you, Lily. What you did for Oliver, letting him go so he could be free, that was an incredibly brave and loving thing." Lily yawned, her eyelids growing heavy. "I didn't want to, but it was the right thing. That's what you and Daddy always say." Emma kissed her daughter's forehead, marveling at the wisdom in her young heart. "Good night, my brave girl." "Good night, Mommy," Lily murmured, already drifting toward sleep. "Good night, Oliver, wherever you are." The years passed, as they inevitably do. The Morgan family remained in their cabin by Lake Whispering Pines, though many things changed. Robert's wildlife photography career flourished, his sensitive portrayals of animal behavior earning him recognition in national magazines. Emma became an author, writing children's books inspired by their forest home. And Lily grew into a thoughtful, compassionate teenager with a deep love for the natural world. The story of Oliver became family lore, a tale told on winter evenings beside the fire, a formative chapter in Lily's childhood that shaped her understanding of love, sacrifice, and the delicate balance between wilderness and humanity. By the time Lily turned 15, Oliver was a distant memory, kept alive through photographs, stories, and occasional updates from Dr. Rivera, who continued to monitor the tracking collars of released bears when possible. Oliver's collar had functioned for 3 years before going silent, longer than most, providing data that showed he had established a territory about 20 miles deep in the national forest, well away from human settlements. "That's a good sign, Doctor?" Rivera had explained during her last visit to the cabin. "It means he's fully adapted to wildlife. Some rehabilitated bears struggle, drifting closer to human areas seeking easy food, but Oliver has embraced his natural instincts." Life had fallen into comfortable patterns for the Morgans. Lily attended the small high school in the nearest town, excelling in science and environmental studies. She volunteered at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center on weekends, working with Dr. Rivera to care for injured animals, though they rarely received bear cubs. Oliver, it seemed, had been a once-in-a-lifetime encounter. Then, in the summer of Lily's 15th year, everything changed. It began with an unusually dry spring, followed by scorching temperatures that baked the forest floor into a tinderbox. By early July, fire warnings were posted throughout the region, and residents were advised to prepare emergency evacuation plans. Robert kept a close eye on the situation, following reports from the Forest Service and maintaining regular contact with Jeff, who had taken up a volunteer position with the local fire watch after retiring from active ranger duties. "It's bad this year," Jeff told Robert during a visit in mid-July. "Worst conditions I've seen in decades. All it would take is one lightning strike or some fool's abandoned campfire." The warning proved prophetic. 3 days later, a violent thunderstorm swept through the mountains, bringing little rain but plenty of lightning. By morning, plumes of smoke were visible from the cabin's porch, rising ominously from the northern ridge. "Pack your emergency bags," Robert instructed Emma and Lily as he hung up the phone after speaking with the fire service. "They're issuing voluntary evacuations for our area. The fire's moving faster than they expected." Emma sprang into action, gathering important documents and family photographs. Lily moved more slowly, standing on the porch with a troubled expression as she watched the smoke thicken in the distance. "Lily, come help me," Emma called from inside. "We need to be ready if the order becomes mandatory." But Lily remained frozen, a strange feeling washing over her. "Mom," she said, her voice barely audible. "The fire, it's in Oliver's territory." Emma joined her daughter on the porch, following her gaze to the smoke-filled horizon. "Oh, Lily," she sighed, wrapping an arm around the teenager's shoulders. "The animals will move away from the fire. It's their instinct." Lily nodded, but the knot of anxiety in her chest only tightened. That night, she barely slept, listening to the increasing activity outside as emergency vehicles passed on the nearby road, and the distant sound of helicopters thrummed overhead. By morning, the situation had deteriorated dramatically. The smoke was thick enough to obscure the lake, ash drifting down like gray snow. Robert received a call from the sheriff's office. Mandatory evacuation was in effect. They had 2 hours to leave. As they loaded the car with their essential belongings, Jeff's truck came barreling up the gravel driveway, skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust. His weathered face was grim as he approached them. "The fire jumped the river," he announced without preamble. "They're setting up a command center at the high school in town. All residents from this sector need to head there for registration and temporary housing assignments." Robert nodded, securing the last bag in the trunk. "We're almost ready. How bad is it?" Jeff pulled off his hat, revealing sweat-matted gray hair. "Worst I've seen in 30 years. The wind shifted overnight, pushing the fire straight toward the wildlife reserve. They've got teams trying to evacuate the animals, but—" He trailed off, his eyes flickering toward Lily, who had gone very still. "The reserve?" she repeated, her voice tight. "Dr. Rivera's center?" Jeff nodded, his expression softening. "They started moving the animals yesterday. Most have been safely relocated." "And the wild animals?" Lily pressed. "In the forest beyond the reserve, where Oliver—" "Lily," Emma interrupted gently. "We can't worry about that right now. We need to focus on getting ourselves to safety." But Lily couldn't let it go. "Jeff, do you know if they're monitoring the collared bears? Are they tracking their movements away from the fire?" The old ranger exchanged a look with Robert before answering carefully. "The Wildlife Service has activated all tracking signals, but their priority is human evacuation. Many animals instinctively flee from fire. Nature has its ways." Lily wasn't reassured. As they finished loading the car, she slipped back into the house, ostensibly to check for forgotten items. In reality, she headed straight to her father's office, where his wildlife photography equipment was stored. She grabbed his high-powered binoculars and a small handheld GPS unit that he used to mark photography locations. On impulse, she also took a worn manila folder from his desk drawer, the folder containing all the tracking data and coordinates from Oliver's collar before it went silent 2 years ago. By the time she returned to the car, Robert was starting the engine. No one noticed the extra items tucked into her backpack as they pulled away from the cabin, the only home Lily had ever known. The drive to town was tense and slow. Other evacuees clogged the narrow mountain roads, and twice they had to stop as fire trucks roared past in the opposite direction. Lily stared out the window, watching the smoke thicken against the blue summer sky. In her mind, she saw not the fire, but memories of a small bear cub with trusting eyes and a tattered teddy bear clutched in his mouth. The high school gymnasium had been transformed into an emergency shelter, with cots arranged in neat rows and volunteers distributing water and information. The Morgans checked in, receiving their temporary housing assignment. A spare classroom that would serve as their home until the evacuation order was lifted. As Emma organized their belongings in the classroom, Robert went to speak with the emergency coordinators, hoping to get more specific information about the fire's path and when they might be able to return home. Lily sat cross-legged on a gym mat, spreading out the contents of the manila folder on the floor before her. Maps, coordinates, behavior notes. Dr. Rivera had been thorough in her documentation of Oliver's movements after his release. Lily traced her finger along the marked territory boundaries, her heart sinking as she realized how directly the fire's path intersected with the area Oliver had claimed as his home. A shadow fell across the papers, and Lily looked up to find Dr. Rivera standing over her, the veterinarian's usually neat appearance disheveled, dark smudges of exhaustion beneath her eyes. "Dr. Rivera," Lily scrambled to her feet, surprised and relieved to see the woman who had been such an important part of Oliver's story. "Are you okay?" The center. "We evacuated all the rehabilitation animals yesterday," Dr. Rivera assured her, kneeling down to examine the maps spread out on the floor. "The buildings may not survive, but the animals are safe." She tapped the territory marking on the map. "You're worried about him, aren't you?" There was no need to specify who him was. Lily nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Dr. Rivera sighed, settling more comfortably on the floor beside Lily. "I won't lie to you, Lily. The fire is moving through his territory, but bears are incredibly resilient and adaptable. They have keen senses that alert them to danger long before humans would notice." "But what if he's denning? Or injured?" Lily pressed. "What if he can't move fast enough?" The veterinarian's expression grew troubled. "That's possible. His collar went offline years ago, so we don't have current location data." She hesitated, then added reluctantly, "There's something else you should know. Last spring, one of our tracking flights spotted a bear that matched Oliver's description with 2 cubs. If it was him, and if he's with his family now, he might be slowed down," Lily finished, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. "Bears are protective parents. He wouldn't abandon his cubs, even in danger." Dr. Rivera nodded grimly. "That's right. Bears, particularly males, can be surprisingly devoted parents." Lily stared at the map, an impossible idea taking shape in her mind. "These coordinates," she said, pointing to the last known location from Oliver's collar. "How old are they?" 2 years, Dr. Rivera replied. "But bears tend to maintain the same general territory once established, especially if it has good food sources and water access." Lily's finger traced a route from the high school to the marked territory. "It's not that far. 20 miles by road, then maybe 5 through the forest." Dr. Rivera frowned, suddenly understanding where Lily's thoughts were headed. "Lily, no. That area is directly in the fire's path. The authorities have closed all access roads." "But what if—" "No," Dr. Rivera said firmly, gathering up the maps and returning them to the folder. "I understand how you feel, but you cannot go looking for him. The fire crews and wildlife service are doing everything they can." Before Lily could argue further, Emma appeared in the doorway, calling her for dinner. Dr. Rivera handed the folder back to Lily with a warning look, then stood to greet Emma. "Marlene, thank goodness you're safe," Emma said, embracing the veterinarian. "Robert just heard that the fire has reached the north end of the lake. They don't think our cabin will make it." Dr. Rivera squeezed Emma's hand sympathetically. I'm so sorry. My house is in the same sector. We just have to hope for the best and be grateful we got out safely." As the adults talked, Lily slipped the folder into her backpack, her resolve hardening. She joined her parents for dinner in the school cafeteria, picking at her food while the conversation swirled around her. Discussions of insurance policies, rebuilding options, community support efforts. None of it penetrated the fog of her concern for Oliver. That night, as her parents finally fell into exhausted sleep on their makeshift beds, Lily lay awake, staring at the classroom ceiling where glow-in-the-dark stars had been affixed in constellations. She thought of Oliver under the real stars, surrounded by encroaching flames, possibly slowed by cubs that depended on him. Decision made, she waited until her father's breathing deepened into familiar snores. Then, moving with deliberate quiet, she dressed in jeans, a long-sleeved shirt, and sturdy hiking boots. Into her backpack went the binoculars, GPS unit, maps, a flashlight, water bottles, and granola bars from the emergency supplies. She added a first aid kit from her mother's tote bag and her cell phone, though she doubted it would have service in the remote areas. Slipping out of the classroom was easy. The school's emergency exits had been propped open to provide better air circulation in the stifling summer heat. Evading the volunteers monitoring the shelter was trickier, but Lily had spent her life in these mountains, learning to move quietly through the forest. The skills served her well now as she skirted the parking lot and headed for the equipment depot where emergency vehicles were staged. Her plan was simple, if desperate: borrow one of the mountain bikes stacked near the supply trucks, ride as far as possible on the access roads before they were fully closed, then continue on foot to Oliver's territory. She would search until dawn, then return before her absence was discovered. What she hadn't counted on was Jeff Carlton, sitting on the tailgate of his truck at the edge of the parking lot, cleaning a pair of field glasses by the light of a lantern. "Kind of late for a stroll, isn't it?" he called softly as she tried to skirt past him in the shadows. Lily froze, then straightened her shoulders and approached him. There was no point in pretense. Jeff had known her since she was born. "I need to find Oliver," she said simply. Jeff nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "Figured as much when I saw you looking at those maps earlier." He patted the truck bed beside him. "Sit down a minute." Reluctantly, Lily perched on the tailgate, her backpack clutched to her chest. "You got a plan?" Jeff asked, continuing to polish the lenses of his field glasses. "Sort of," Lily admitted. "Borrow a bike, get as close as I can on the roads, then hike in. I have the GPS coordinates for his territory." Jeff whistled low. "That's about a 25-mile journey through evacuated areas in the middle of the night with a forest fire approaching. Quite an adventure for a 15-year-old girl." Put that way, it did sound reckless. Lily felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I know it's crazy, but I have to try. Oliver might be in trouble." "Oliver," Jeff said thoughtfully, "is a full-grown wild bear who's survived in these mountains for a decade. You're a human teenager with no firefighting training or wildlife emergency experience." Lily's eyes prickled with tears of frustration. "So, I should just do nothing? While he could be trapped or hurt or—" She broke off, unable to voice her worst fears. Jeff set down his field glasses and turned to face her fully. "I didn't say that. I said your plan needs work." He glanced at his watch. "The night patrol along the North Access Road leaves in 15 minutes. They're doing a final sweep before that sector is completely closed off. I was going to ride along anyway to check on some of the old fire towers." Lily's breath caught. "You'd take me with you?" "Absolutely not," Jeff said firmly. "That would be irresponsible and probably illegal, considering the evacuation orders." Lily's hopes crashed. but then she noticed the glint in Jeff's eye. "However," he continued, "if someone happened to be hidden under the tarp in the back of my truck when I leave, and if that someone happened to have good navigation skills and wilderness training." He shrugged. "Well, I can't be held responsible for stowaways, can I?" Lily stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Jeff's expression grew serious. "Listen carefully, Lily. If, and this is a big if, someone were to come with me, they would need to follow my instructions exactly. No heroics, no arguments. The moment I say we turn back, we turn back. Clear?" Lily nodded vigorously. "Clear. And," Jeff added, "that someone would need to leave a note for their parents explaining where they've gone and promising to stay safe. Parents worry, you know." "I'll write it now," Lily agreed, already digging in her backpack for paper and a pen. 10 minutes later, a note was tucked under Emma's pillow, and Lily was concealed beneath a canvas tarp in the back of Jeff's truck, surrounded by emergency equipment and trying to control her breathing as the vehicle rumbled to life. The journey through the darkened town was tense, especially when they stopped at the checkpoint leading to the evacuation zone. Lily held perfectly still as Jeff chatted with the guards, presenting his volunteer fire watch credentials and explaining his mission to check the old fire towers for structural integrity. "Be careful out there, Carlton," one of the guards warned as they waved him through. "Latest report says the fire's moving faster than predicted. They're pulling back the professional crews from the north sector by midnight." "I'll be well out before then," Jeff assured them. Once they were past the checkpoint and out of earshot, he called back to Lily, "You can come out now, but stay low. We've got about 30 minutes of driving before we reach the closest point to Oliver's territory." Lily emerged from under the tarp, her hair damp with sweat from the summer heat and nervous tension. Through the truck's windows, she could see the night sky glowing an ominous orange-red to the north, the reflection of the massive fire consuming the forest. "Jeff," she ventured after a few minutes of silent driving, "what if we can't find him? What if we're too late?" The old ranger's eyes remained fixed on the winding road ahead. "Then at least you'll know you tried. Sometimes that's all we can do, Lily. Make the effort, even when success isn't guaranteed." The access road narrowed as they climbed higher into the mountains, eventually becoming little more than a dirt track with forest pressing close on both sides. The smell of smoke grew stronger, stinging Lily's nostrils and making her eyes water. "This is as far as we go by vehicle," Jeff announced, pulling into a small clearing beside a weathered fire tower that rose above the tree line. "From here, Oliver's territory is about 3 miles north-northeast. The fire is coming from the northwest, so we should be approaching from a relatively safe direction." They gathered supplies, Jeff adding a two-way radio, emergency foil blankets, and respirator masks to Lily's already packed backpack. As they prepared to set out on foot, he handed her a sturdy walking stick and a small canister. "Bear spray," he explained when she looked at it quizzically. "Just in case. Remember, Oliver may recognize you, but he's a wild animal now, with cubs to protect. Wild animals in danger can be unpredictable." Lily nodded solemnly, tucking the canister into her belt holster. The thought of needing protection from Oliver seemed absurd, but she understood Jeff's caution. They set out along a narrow game trail that wound through the dense forest, their way lit by powerful flashlights and the increasingly bright glow of the fire. Jeff set a brisk pace, occasionally pausing to check his compass and the map Lily had brought. The forest was eerily quiet. No bird calls, no rustling of small creatures in the underbrush. The wildlife had already fled, sensing the approaching danger before humans ever issued evacuation orders. Only the distant roar of the fire and the crunch of their boots on the dry earth broke the silence. After nearly an hour of hiking, they reached a small stream that cut through a rocky ravine. Jeff consulted the map again. According to your coordinates, we're entering Oliver's territory now. This stream would be a natural boundary. Lily knelt by the water, touching it lightly with her fingertips. The stream was barely a trickle, the summer drought having reduced it significantly. He would have drunk from this, she murmured, a strange sense of connection washing over her. Maybe brought his cubs here to fish. Jeff scanned the banks with his flashlight, the beam catching on something in the soft mud. "Lily," he said quietly, "look at this." She joined him, her heart skipping as the light illuminated what was unmistakably a bare track. A massive paw print pressed into the mud, far larger than her hand. Could it be him?" she whispered. Jeff knelt to examine the print more closely. "It's fresh, made within the last few hours, and it's heading that way." He pointed upstream toward higher ground. Away from the fire, that's a good sign. New hope surged through Lily. He's alive, and he's moving. "Let's follow the tracks," Jeff suggested, already starting upstream. Bears often use waterways as travel routes, especially in emergencies. They followed the stream as it wound uphill, Jeff's experienced eye picking out occasional tracks and signs of bear passage. Claw marks on trees, disturbed vegetation, scat. The air grew thicker with smoke as they progressed, and distant cracking sounds suggested falling trees consumed by flames. "The fire's getting closer," Jeff observed grimly, checking his watch. "We've got maybe an hour before we need to turn back, regardless of what we find." Lily wanted to protest, but remembered her promise. Instead, she focused on scanning the forest around them, straining her eyes for any movement, any sign of Oliver. They had just reached a small clearing when Jeff suddenly grabbed Lily's arm, pulling her to a stop. "Listen," he hissed. At first, Lily heard nothing over the blood pounding in her ears and the distant roar of fire. Then it came again, a low, distressed whine, followed by a deeper, rumbling growl. "Bears?" Jeff confirmed, his grip on Lily's arm tightening, more than one, and they sound agitated. Lily pulled free of his grasp, moving toward the sounds despite Jeff's whispered warnings. Beyond the clearing, the forest thickened again, the trees growing close together on a steep, rocky slope. The whining was louder here, punctuated by what sounded like frustrated huffs and the scrape of claws on stone. Using her flashlight to navigate, Lily carefully rounded a massive boulder and froze at the sight before her. In a small depression between rocks was a female bear, her dark fur highlighted by the beam of Lily's flashlight. Beside her huddled two cubs, no more than a few months old, their small bodies pressed against their mother's side. All three appeared exhausted and frightened, the cubs whimpering as the mother bear huffed and pawed at what Lily now realized was a collapsed rock slide blocking what must have been a den entrance or escape route. But it wasn't this bear family that made Lily's heart stop. It was the fourth bear, an enormous male standing on the opposite side of the clearing. He was powerfully built, his brown fur matted in places, his head lowered as he paced back and forth, occasionally charging at the rock slide and slamming his massive body against the stones in what seemed to be an attempt to clear a path. "Oliver," Lily breathed, the name escaping her lips before she could stop it. The male bear's head snapped up, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. For one breathless moment, the forest seemed to fall completely silent. No fire roar, no cub whimpers, nothing but the connection between a teenage girl and the bear she had once slept beside every night. Lily! Jeff's urgent whisper came from just behind her. Back away slowly. That's a mother with cubs, the most dangerous situation possible. But Lily couldn't move. The male's bear was staring directly at her now, his dark eyes reflecting her flashlight beam. Something about those eyes, the intelligence in them, the focused attention, sent a shiver of recognition through her. "It's him," she whispered to Jeff. "I know it's him." The bear took a step toward them, then another, his massive head swinging from side to side as if processing conflicting instincts. Jeff raised his rifle, not to shoot, Lily knew, but as a precaution, and the bear froze, a low growl rumbling from his chest. "Lily, please," Jeff hissed. "We need to back away. Something's wrong here. That female isn't with this male. Look at her posture. She's defensive. And he's too close to her cubs. This could turn violent any second." But Lily was observing something different. "No, Jeff, look. He's not threatening her. He's trying to help." It was true. Despite the female's defensive posture, the male bear, Oliver, Lily was now certain, kept returning to the rock slide, pushing at the stones, then pacing in frustration when they wouldn't budge. The mother and cubs are trapped, Lily realized aloud. They can't get past the rock slide, and the fire is coming from the other direction. They're cornered. She turned to Jeff, her eyes wide with sudden understanding. Oliver is trying to save them. Jeff lowered his rifle slightly, squinting through the smoke-filled air at the scene. "I'll be damned," he muttered. That's not normal bear behavior. Males don't typically help females with cubs unless they're their own offspring. "Oliver isn't a typical bear," Lily said simply, a plan already forming in her mind. She shrugged off her backpack and handed it to Jeff. "Hold this." "Lily, whatever you're thinking," Jeff began, but she was already moving forward into the clearing. "Lily!" She ignored his urgent whispers, her focus entirely on Oliver. The massive bear had returned to the rock slide, slamming his shoulder against a particularly large boulder with a frustrated grunt. "Oliver," Lily called softly, her voice just loud enough to carry across the clearing. "Oliver, it's me. It's Lily." The bear froze, then slowly turned to face her. Behind him, the female bear huffed in alarm, gathering her cubs closer with one powerful sweep of her paw. Lily took another step forward, then another, her heart pounding so hard she was sure the bears could hear it. "Remember me? I used to read you stories. You used to sleep beside my bed." Oliver, if it truly was him, tilted his head, a gesture so familiar that tears sprang to Lily's eyes. Slowly, carefully, she extended her hand, palm up, just as she had done a decade ago by the lake's edge. "Lily, don't," Jeff pleaded from the edge of the clearing. "It's too dangerous." But something was happening. The male bear lowered his massive head, sniffing the air intently. Then, with a deliberate slowness that spoke of caution rather than aggression, he approached Lily, each heavy step bringing him closer until she could feel the warmth of his breath on her outstretched hand. Time seemed to stretch, the moment suspended between heartbeats. Lily held absolutely still, barely breathing, as Oliver's wet nose touched her palm, a familiar sensation, one she hadn't felt in 10 years but that her body somehow remembered perfectly. "Hi, Oliver," she whispered, tears flowing freely now. "I found you." The bear made a soft sound, almost a whimper, then pressed his head against her hand, not the tentative touch of a wild animal, but the deliberate nuzzle of recognition. "I knew it," Lily murmured, daring to stroke the coarse fur of his head. "I knew you'd remember me." From across the clearing came a warning huff from the female bear, drawing Oliver's attention back to the immediate crisis. He turned away from Lily, moving back to the rock slide with renewed determination. "He wants to help them," Lily called to Jeff, who remained at the edge of the clearing, rifle ready but lowered. "And we need to help him." She gestured to the female and her cubs. "They're going to die if they can't get past those rocks. The fire's too close." Jeff hesitated, years of wilderness experience warning against interfering with wild animals warring with the extraordinary scene before him. Finally, survival instinct won out. "If we're going to do this, we need to be quick," he said, setting down Lily's backpack and approaching cautiously. "That fire's less than a mile away now. I can smell it getting stronger." It was true. The smoke was thickening by the minute, and the orange glow behind the trees was brighter, closer. They had little time. Jeff assessed the rock slide quickly. "It's not as bad as it looks," he decided. "That one large boulder is the key. If we can move it, the rest might shift enough for them to pass." Oliver seemed to understand their intentions. He backed away, giving Jeff room to approach the rock slide, though he remained watchful, his eyes darting between the humans and the trapped bear family. "I need a lever," Jeff muttered, searching the area. He spotted a fallen branch of suitable size and dragged it to the boulder. "Lily, I need you to find smaller branches, anything sturdy we can use as fulcrums." They worked frantically, gathering materials while the bears watched. Oliver, with what seemed like understanding, the female with wary fear. The cubs whimpered continuously now, sensing the approaching danger that the humans could not yet see, but all the bears could smell. Using wilderness survival techniques, Jeff constructed a crude but effective lever system. "On 3, he instructed Lily, positioning her at the end of the main branch. 1, 2, 3, push." They strained against the lever, muscles burning with effort. The boulder shifted slightly, then settled back. "Again," Jeff ordered. 1, 2, 3, push." This time, they were joined by a third force. Oliver, throwing his massive weight against the boulder alongside their lever. The combined pressure was enough. With a grinding sound, the boulder rolled free, triggering a cascade of smaller rocks and debris. "Clear!" Jeff yelled, pulling Lily back as the rockslide collapsed, revealing a narrow but passable gap leading to what appeared to be an animal trail on the other side. The female bear didn't hesitate. With a huffing sound to her cubs, she charged through the opening, the young bears scrambling after her. Within seconds, they had disappeared into the darkness beyond, fleeing from the approaching fire. Oliver remained, watching the space where the bear family had vanished. Then, to Lily's astonishment, he turned back toward her and Jeff. A strange tension hung in the air, a wild animal faced with imminent danger, seeming to debate whether to flee or stay. "He's torn," Jeff observed quietly, between his instinct to escape the fire and something else. Lily knew what that something else was. She stepped forward once more, placing her hand gently on Oliver's broad head. "Go," she said softly. "It's okay. I found you, just like I wanted to. I know you're alive. That's enough." She leaned closer, whispering words meant only for him. "I've missed you every day, but this is where you belong, with other bears in the forest. Be free, Oliver." The bear looked at her with those intelligent eyes, and for a heartbeat, Lily was 5 years old again, making a promise to a frightened cub. Then Oliver made a soft chuffing sound, nudged her hand one last time, and turned toward the opening in the rocks. Just before he disappeared, something caught Lily's eye. A flash of faded brown dangling from his massive jaws. Her breath caught as she realized what it was. The tattered remains of her childhood teddy bear, carried by Oliver for all these years, now clutched gently in his mouth as he fled the approaching fire. "He kept it," she whispered, tears streaming down her smoke-smudged face. "All this time, he kept it." "Lily, we need to go," Jeff urged, tugging at her arm. "The fire's too close now." As if to emphasize his point, a loud crack sounded from the forest behind them, followed by the thunderous crash of a falling tree. The smoke was now thick enough to choke them, and embers carried by the wind were landing dangerously close. "Right," Lily agreed, reluctantly turning away from where Oliver had vanished. "Let's go." They retraced their steps as quickly as possible, but the journey back was far more treacherous than their arrival had been. The fire was advancing rapidly, driven by shifting winds, forcing them to detour several times. What had been a clear trail was now obscured by smoke, and the air grew hotter with each passing minute. "We're not going to make it back to the truck," Jeff admitted grimly, as they paused to catch their breath behind a large rock formation. "The fires cut off our return route." Lily felt a flicker of panic. "What do we do?" Jeff pulled out his two-way radio, which had been crackling with emergency communications throughout their trek. "Fire Command, this is Carlton, over," he called into the device. "We're stranded in Section 22, approximately 3 miles northeast of Fire Tower 7. Fire has cut off our evacuation route. Request immediate assistance, over." Static answered him, then a garbled response. "Copy, Carlton. Your position?" The rest was lost in a burst of interference. "They might have gotten our location," Jeff said, hooking the radio back to his belt. "But even if they did, helicopter rescue in these conditions would be extremely difficult." He scanned their surroundings, his experienced eye searching for options. "We need to find shelter, somewhere the fire can't reach." "The stream," Lily suggested. "We could follow it downhill. Water might provide some protection." Jeff nodded, looking impressed by her quick thinking. "Good idea. If we can find a wider section or a pool deep enough to submerge in, we might be able to ride out the worst of it." They set off again, stumbling through the increasingly thick smoke toward where they remembered the stream running. The small trickle they had followed earlier seemed woefully inadequate against the inferno bearing down on them, but it was their best hope. As they pushed through the underbrush, a new sound reached them, a deep, guttural huffing that was distinctly ursine. Lily froze, peering through the smoky haze. A large shape materialized before them on the path, blocking their way. "Oliver," Lily called hesitantly. The bear, and it was indeed Oliver still carrying the remnants of the teddy bear, huffed again, more insistently this time. Then, to their astonishment, he turned and began walking away from them, pausing to look back as if checking whether they were following. "He wants us to follow him," Lily realized, already moving forward. Jeff caught her arm. "Lily, we can't just follow a bear into the burning forest. We need to get to the stream." "I trust him," she said with absolute certainty. "Oliver knows these mountains better than we do. He might know a safe place." Jeff hesitated, weighing their dwindling options against the bizarre sight of a wild bear seemingly offering guidance. Finally, he nodded. "Lead on," he told Oliver, as if the bear could understand his words. Perhaps he could, because Oliver immediately set off at a brisk pace, leading them not toward the stream as they'd planned, but along a barely visible game trail that wound up and around the rocky slope. The trail was narrow and treacherous in places, but it also seemed to be taking them away from the worst of the smoke and heat. "Where's he leading us?" Jeff wondered aloud, as they scrambled over a particularly steep section of trail. Lily didn't respond, saving her breath for the grueling climb. She focused instead on Oliver's retreating figure, her faith unwavering despite the increasingly desperate situation. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes of hard climbing, the trail opened onto a small plateau. Oliver stopped, waiting for them to catch up. When they reached him, panting and coughing from the smoke, he dropped the teddy bear at Lily's feet and moved to the edge of the plateau. Below them stretched a sight that momentarily stole Lily's breath. A hidden valley, tucked between two ridges, with a glittering lake at its center. The valley floor was lush with vegetation, a stark contrast to the burning forest they had just traversed. "It's beautiful," Lily murmured, picking up the tattered teddy bear and clutching it to her chest. Jeff was more practical. "It's defensible," he observed. The rocky cliffs on both sides would make it hard for the fire to jump across, and the lake provides a water source and refuge if needed. He turned to Lily with newfound respect. "Your bear friend might just have saved our lives." Oliver huffed softly, then started down a switchback trail leading into the valley. They followed, the descent considerably easier than their ascent had been. As they neared the valley floor, Lily noticed something else. Movement near the lake's edge. Squinting through the distant haze, she could make out animal shapes. Deer, a family of raccoons, and even what looked like another bear with cubs. "It's a refuge," she realized aloud. "The animals know to come here when there's danger. That's why Oliver brought us here." Jeff nodded slowly, the seasoned ranger still processing the extraordinary behavior they were witnessing. "I've heard old stories from indigenous tribes about animal sanctuaries during forest fires, places where natural features protect against the flames, where predator and prey coexist temporarily under an unspoken truce. I always thought they were just legends." By the time they reached the valley floor, night had fully fallen, the darkness broken only by the orange glow of the fire raging across the ridge they had left behind. The air here was clearer, though still tainted with smoke. Oliver led them to the lake's edge, where a small overhang created a natural shelter. "This will do for the night," Jeff decided, unslinging Lily's backpack and retrieving the emergency foil blankets. "The fire won't reach us here, and in the morning, we can try to make contact with the rescue teams again." Lily nodded absently, her attention fixed on Oliver. The massive bear had moved a short distance away and was now sitting on his haunches, watching the fire from across the lake. His posture was almost human, vigilant, concerned, protective. "I'm going to talk to him," she told Jeff, who looked like he wanted to object but simply sighed instead. "Be careful," he cautioned. "Fire or no fire, he's still a wild animal." Lily approached Oliver slowly, the tattered teddy bear still clutched in her hands. When she reached him, she sat down on the rocky shore beside his massive form, their shoulders almost touching. A teenager and a wild bear, united by a bond that defied explanation. "Thank you," she said softly. "You saved us." She held up the worn teddy bear. "And you kept this all these years." Oliver turned his great head toward her, his dark eyes reflecting the distant fire. There was intelligence in that gaze, and something more, a recognition that transcended the natural boundaries between human and animal. For a long while, they sat in companionable silence, watching the fire rage across the distant ridge. It was beautiful in its terrible way, nature's fury unleashed, destructive, yet ultimately regenerative. Lily found herself thinking about the cycles of life, about endings and beginnings, about bonds that could stretch across years and remain unbroken. "I never forgot you," she told Oliver. "Not for a single day. I used to imagine where you were, what you were doing, if you were happy." She smiled, despite the tears tracking through the soot on her face. "And you were. You have a life here, a purpose. You helped that mother and her cubs. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." Oliver made a soft chuffing sound, then did something unexpected. He leaned against her, ever so gently, his warm fur pressed against her side. The gesture was so reminiscent of their nights together when she was a child that Lily had to stifle a sob. They remained that way until Lily's eyes grew heavy with exhaustion. Finally, reluctantly, she stood. "I should get back to Jeff," she said, "but I'll see you in the morning before we leave." As if understanding her words, Oliver huffed once more, then turned his attention back to the fire. Lily made her way back to the natural shelter where Jeff had created a makeshift camp. He was already asleep, worn out by the night's ordeal. Wrapping herself in a foil blanket, Lily settled down beside him, the teddy bear tucked securely under her arm. Despite the extraordinary circumstances, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She awoke to the sound of helicopter rotors. Dawn had broken, revealing a smoke-hazed sky and the charred remains of the forest beyond the protected valley. Jeff was already up, using his radio to communicate with the search and rescue team that had spotted them from the air. "They're sending down a basket," he told Lily as she rubbed sleep from her eyes. "We're being evacuated. Your parents are waiting at the command center. Apparently, they raised holy hell when they found your note." Lily nodded, but her first thought wasn't of her parents or the impending rescue. "Where's Oliver?" Jeff's expression softened. "He left about an hour ago, led the female and her cubs out of the valley, heading east away from the fire. The other animals followed." Disappointment washed over Lily, though she tried to hide it. She had wanted to say a proper goodbye to thank Oliver once more for saving their lives. Jeff seemed to understand. "He's a wild animal, Lily. He did what wild animals do, adapted, survived, moved on. But what he did last night—" The old ranger shook his head in wonder. "In 30 years in these mountains I've never seen anything like it. That bear remembered you. He recognized you and chose to help you. That's something special." Lily clutched the tattered teddy bear, all that remained of her connection to Oliver. "Do you think I'll ever see him again?" Jeff considered this as the helicopter hovered overhead, preparing to lower the rescue basket. "I can't say for sure, but these mountains aren't that big, and Oliver seems to have a way of finding you when it matters most." The rescue operation went smoothly. Within an hour, they were at the emergency command center being checked by medical personnel and debriefed by fire officials. And then her parents were there, wrapping Lily in fierce embraces, alternating between tears of relief and stern lectures about running off into danger. "I had to try," Lily explained, showing them the teddy bear. "And it was worth it. I found Oliver. He saved us from the fire." Her parents exchanged looks of astonishment as Jeff confirmed her story, adding his own observations about the extraordinary behavior of the bear they had encountered. "I always knew there was something special about that cub," Robert said, shaking his head in wonder. "But this is beyond anything I could have imagined." In the days that followed, as the massive fire was gradually contained and extinguished, life began to return to a semblance of normalcy. The Morgans' cabin had survived, though barely. The fire had come within 100 yards before a last-minute wind shift had spared it. Dr. Rivera's wildlife center had not been so fortunate. It would need to be completely rebuilt. The story of Lily and Oliver spread quickly through the tight-knit mountain community. Some dismissed it as the exaggerated tale of a frightened teenager and an exhausted ranger. Others, particularly those who remembered the orphaned cub from a decade earlier, found it easier to believe. Dr. Rivera, upon examining the tattered teddy bear and hearing Jeff's detailed account, declared it scientifically improbable but emotionally undeniable. For Lily, the truth of what had happened needed no external validation. She knew what she had experienced, what she had felt in those moments with Oliver by the lake. Their connection, forged in her childhood and sustained across time and circumstance, was real. That was enough. Summer turned to fall, and Lily returned to school, her perspective forever altered by her night in the burning forest. She threw herself into environmental studies with renewed passion, determined to protect the wilderness that Oliver and countless other animals called home. On weekends, she volunteered with the Forest Service's Wildlife Monitoring Program, helping to track and document animal movements as the burned areas began their slow process of regeneration. It was during one such monitoring expedition, nearly 6 months after the fire, that Lily found herself alone in a remote section of the recovering forest. New growth was already emerging from the blackened soil. Tiny saplings, resilient ferns, wildflowers taking advantage of the newly opened canopy, life finding a way, as it always did. She was photographing a particularly vibrant patch of new growth when a familiar sensation prickled the back of her neck, the feeling of being watched. Slowly, carefully, she turned. At the edge of the clearing stood Oliver, his massive form unmistakable even at a distance. He looked healthy and strong, his coat glossy in the autumn sunshine. Behind him, partially hidden by the undergrowth, were 2 small cubs. Not the ones from the fire, Lily realized, but newer, younger cubs. Oliver's own offspring. Oliver, she breathed, remaining perfectly still, not wanting to frighten the cubs. "You're a father." The bear huffed softly, as if in confirmation. One of the cubs peeked curiously around his leg, then ducked back into hiding when it spotted Lily. For a long moment, they regarded each other across the clearing. The girl who had once slept beside a bear cub, and the wild animal who had never forgotten her kindness. No words were needed, no explanations or justifications. Their bond existed in a space beyond logic or language, a testament to the mysterious connections that sometimes form between species. Finally, Oliver turned away, nudging his cubs gently with his nose. The little family disappeared into the recovering forest, leaving Lily with tears of joy streaming down her face and a certainty in her heart that this would not be their last encounter. 10 years later, a grown woman stood on the porch of a small research station deep in the national forest. Dr. Lily Morgan, wildlife biologist and bear specialist, was following in Dr. Rivera's footsteps, dedicating her career to understanding and protecting the creatures that had shaped her childhood. Her latest research project focused on multi-generational memory in bears, the ways in which behaviors and knowledge were passed from parent to offspring. Her colleagues had been skeptical at first, but her preliminary findings were compelling enough to secure continued funding. As she sipped her morning coffee, watching the mist rise from the valley below, a familiar movement at the forest's edge caught her eye. A massive male bear, older now, with streaks of gray in his brown fur, emerged from the trees. Beside him walked a younger female, and trailing behind her were 3 small cubs, tumbling and playing in the early light. Lily smiled, recognizing not just Oliver, but his daughter and grandcubs. The older bear paused, lifting his head to scent the air. Their eyes met across the distance, and Lily raised her hand in greeting. "Hello, old friend," she called softly. "Welcome home." And in that moment, the circle that had begun beside a lake 20 years earlier was complete. A story of connection, sacrifice, and reunion that would live on in the bloodlines of bears and the hearts of humans for generations to come.